Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. So here we'll see how to use bloc library to do HTTP requests and manage the state of our app. So this is the app that we're going to build. Let's restart it. So it would auto reload everything, and as it reloads you'll see that there is loading status over here, and then it loads the information from the server, and of course you can go back to next page, click on the certain list and come back. So this is what we'd be doing. Now, because we are going to fetch data from the server, so first we'll go ahead and create a repository, which means that we'll build a mechanism to get the data from the server using our API. Now, to be able to do that, first we'll come over here and create a new folder inside this, and we'll call it repos. Okay. Now, inside this, we'll create a new Dart file, and we'll call it repositories.dart. So inside this, I have this class which is called user repository, and over here I have this endpoint, and then we created a method to get the data. And of course we are going to use HTTP package to do that. So make sure you come to the pubspec.yml file, and over here you install HTTP package, because we'll be using that package to get data from the server. And then we have another package, our plugin. This is called Equitable, and we'll learn more about it, and we need this. And this is our Flutter BLoC, and this is what we are going to focus on today. This method is coming from this package over here. Okay, now we'll go ahead and take a look at this endpoint over here, and it'll give us some idea how to build our model. In the browser we can view the response, and as you see, the total response is this one, and inside this we have this data property or data tag, and this data tag actually showing this amount of data over here. Now this is the data that we want to focus, and over here at the top we want to focus on ID, email, and we see over here first name, and we also see last name and avatar. So we would be building a model based on this data over here, okay, or the data fields or the data properties we see. So now let's go ahead and build a model. We'll build user model file, and inside this we'll create a user model class. So here is our simple user model class, and it has ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar, and these are the fields that we have just seen in our response on the browser. And then we created this user model and factory constructor, and for this reason we have to pass map to it. So whatever we get from the server, so that would be more like a map. So after that we'll come to a repository over here, and as you see, first we get the response, and then we decode it, and after decoding the body we just take the data section. So whatever we get, that is the JSON decoded, which means JSON information. Now from this JSON information we want to convert it to an object, and those objects we want to save in a list, and then we'll return it. That's what exactly we are doing over here. First we need to import our library, which is user model, and over here as you can see this result, we are making it a map, and then we are accessing each of them, and as we access we convert it to an object, and then we return it, and once the iteration is done we convert it to a list. Okay, so over here we want to return a list. So here we are returning a list using this user model, and since this is an asynchronous operation, so over here we are returning it as a future. Okay, now we need to understand what is bloc pattern, or the bloc library.
So here we'll take a look how to use the bloc pattern or bloc for API request. First we'll have our UI, and from UI we'll create a call to the bloc. Now of course this bloc we have to create using bloc pattern or bloc library. So this bloc will have two things. One is event and states. So at first when UI connects with the bloc will create. Inside this it will trigger an event. So our UI will trigger an event, and that event eventually would call repository to the server. Okay, so it will make a connection to the server eventually through an endpoint. So from the server we get the data, and that data pass back to event, or that data pass back to our bloc. Once again this bloc will create, and as we have the data, then we trigger a new state or a new change. State means here change. Okay, so as we have new changes or new states, our UI would know. How the UI would know? UI would know using this bloc, the bloc library. Of course it would know it from our bloc as well, okay, because our bloc connects with the bloc pattern library or bloc. Okay, so this is how it works.
So inside this lab we are going to create a new folder, and we'll call it blocks, and inside this blocks, here we'll create a new file and we'll call it appstates.dart. Here we go, and here we created our first state. And now it may look very confusing if you're coming from RiverPod or GetX or even Provider. What the heck is this? Well, first, to create state, you have to create an abstract class. So if we are going to use Flutter BLoC, you have to remember creating states always happens through by creating a class. It's not like GetX that you just declare a variable like say x.obs and it automatically becomes reactive. With with BLoC it doesn't work like that. First thing you have to know, in BLoC you have to create class for each state. Okay, so if you have states like in GetX, say for example loading a boolean, you could have bool loading true. Then if the data is loaded, then we can say loading false, okay, like that. So that's what we do in Flutter GetX, okay, but with BLoC it doesn't like that. For each of this variable to be able to manage them, change from true to false like that, we have to create a class, and this is the class that we created, okay. Now how it starts actually, so it starts by creating an abstract class. So you might have a separated file like I have over here, appstates.dart, and in this class, in this file, I'll create a class, and that class will not have any body, but that would extend equatable. Now equatable is used for comparing two variables whether they are same or not, because if the two variables or the variables they have the same value, we are not going to trigger a change on the UI. We don't want to draw. Now equatable helps you to check this if two variables or the variables they have the same value or not. If they have different value, then we want to draw our UI. Otherwise we don't want to draw UI because that could be very expensive. Okay, so that's why your abstract class that should extend equatable. Okay, now then we actually work with states. Now in our case we'll have three states. So the first one is like data loading state. So actually we also call it over here user loading state or user data loading state. It doesn't really matter how you call it. And the second one could be over here, say for example data loaded state. Okay, so over here we'll create a new state after the data has been loaded. Okay, now after the data has been loaded in this using this repository. Okay, so this would be our initial state, and there could be another state, so which is called data error loading state, which means that we were not able to load data from the API. So that means that we have to create three classes, and we already did one and we have to do two more, but we'll do them step by step. So this class is called state. So this is what we have seen. So here we trigger state. So once again, this is not like GetX, Provider, or RiverPod. It's very different. So in BLoC, you have to create a class for each state, and we'll see how to change the state of this class. So now over here, because we are extending equatable, now equatable has a property which is called getProp. So you have to override it, because eventually our user loading state is going to extend equatable. So we are going to override it, and then over here we'll set it to null. So this means the properties over here, they are null, which also means that we are not going to pass anything to this class. We'll just call this class, and as we call this class, we'll change the state. Okay, so that's the first step we have done. And after doing this, we have to go ahead and create events. Now once again, in BLoC, you have to create class for states. You have to also create class for events. So over here we created a base class or abstract class, and the class name is user event, and once again it extends equatable, and we are adding a constructor to it for this class. Now the way you create states, like over here we did, the same way we create events. So for each event you should have each dedicated class, and your event class should extend your base class, which is user event. In this case, user event eventually extends equatable, so we have to override the properties. Now here we also have immutable, which means that after creating these classes, we are not going to change the properties of these classes. The same over here. Okay, so that's why we tag or use the meta tag, which is called immutable, which means that after creating these classes, the properties and internal things we are not going to change. Anyway, now back to events. So we just created states and events. Now we need to find a way to connect them. So we need to find a way to connect this too. So we have to create a new class, and in that class we'll kind of inject states and events together. So let's go ahead and connect them together using block library, and that's called creating a block. So we'll go ahead and create a block. So here we created a new Dart class which is called fBlocks, and inside this we'll create our block. So here we created our block for the app, and this is called user block. You can name it anything, and we are extending block over here. Now this block should take the events class and the states class. So remember, this is the class that we created early, which is over here, user event, and this is the user state class that we created early. Now this block is coming from actually block library, so you have to pass events and state to it. In general, that means events class and state classes. And this user block has a constructor, so we need to pass the user repository. Why? Because eventually we are going to call this class from the UI. As we call, we'll pass this user repository to it. And then because we are extending block over here, so we also have to provide value for the super constructor, so we are assigning the initial value. And after that, inside the constructor body, we are calling a method which is called on method. Now on method itself actually takes a type of event. So what is the event? In our case, load user event. So this is a name of an event, so you can use this one, or you can find this name or use this name to do something. So in this case, we say, hey, go ahead and emit a state. So this is called user loading state. So we'll call this one, and then after that this state would get called, and we'll see that UI has changes. So from our UI, actually we'll be able to call this event, which will cause this states to be emitted or the states to be triggered, and we'll verify it very soon, and we'll see actually how it works. To be able to work with this one, to be able to show this state and to be able to trigger this event from the UI, now we need to go ahead and work on our main.dart file. Here is our myApp class, which is a stateless class, and inside this we have this material app, and then we have this repository provider. Of course, this repository provider is coming from Flutter BLoC, as you can see over here. Now what is this? Because we want to load some data from the server, and we want to load them only once. So in our home property, we want to inject the user repository. Of course, you cannot do it directly. You have to use through RepositoryProvider, which is coming from our Flutter BLoC, and as well as the place where you want to use this repository, like the child, you have to mention that. In our case, our child is home. So what is RepositoryProvider is doing is loading the data from the server, and it does only once. Okay, and then those data and states, they would be available for this child over here. Okay, all right. Now after that, the actual magic happens in home class over here, but of course this is a stateless class. Now as you come down over here inside this build method, you see that we have block provider. Now the block provider is pretty much like if you're coming from getX, so that is like get.put. So inside this, actually you can inject your controller or your blocks, because we are in block, so we don't say controller. In block they call it block, so we created a block. So we are injecting our block, okay? And of course you need to pass it to this create property, and at the same time we have to pass the context, okay? Now as we did that, we can also load the service inside this block, and because we already injected the repository early at the top, so inside this block we'll be able to access them. Now to be able to access it, first you need to pass the repository using the context, and then we use this cascading operator over here, and then we add an event. What's the event? That event name is called load user event. Now this is the event that actually I was talking about. Now this event refers to this one, but as I said, at the same time, this event in our app blocks, which is referred on here. Okay, so it triggers an event and it comes here. Okay, and as it does, it wants to trigger a state over here, as you see. Now let's come back over here. So yes, it triggered the state. So what state? It triggers user loading state. So this state is available on the Flutter framework, I mean on our app, because we are using BLoC. Now how it is available and how to check that, to be able to do that. Now those state would be available, and this is available using the variable called state, and you can check. So you can just directly compare. If the state is user loading, then do something. So remember, over here we loaded this event, and this event actually eventually over here emitted this state. So that means that when I'm over here, as I'm checking, the state is already there because we have emitted this state. So it should be in the app itself, it should be in the memory, and we can check that using this if condition. And as we do that, we can do whatever we want. But in this case, first we are just showing a simple widget which is called circular progress indicator. Now I'm going to run my app. Oh, it's beautiful. As you see, our app is here loading, and it's loading forever, and that also means that our block is working. Our app is working with the block management library. One more thing I want to talk about here, like right now it looks like redundant, and in this case we may not pass it, so we can skip this one. So we need to come to our app blocks over here, and at the same time we can skip this section, so which looks like redundant and not useful for this moment. So we can just remove that, and we'll see that it still works. But at the same time, we need to make a tiny change to it, because this section is also redundant in this case because we are not doing anything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment this out, and over here I'll put my home class. Okay, now let's go ahead and reload, and we'll see it works exactly the same, nothing changed. Okay, now why we have this repository? Because we want to load the data from the very beginning our app boots up. So if you don't have data loading like that, you can just directly go ahead with bloc provider. Okay, but because we want to load the data from the server and we want to do it only once, so we injected it. But even if you don't use this one, your basic understanding to bloc shouldn't change. So anyway, so over here we have this state that is going on forever. So after this state, actually we want to do something. What do you want to do? So we'll come over here inside this app blocks. Actually here we would trigger something. So simply we could trigger, hey, after loading it, we'd be able to say it. So, hey, you emitted the first state. So how do you stop this state? Of course we could do that. Now to be able to do that, we have to create another state. But right now, if you come over here, you only see that we have only one state. Okay, so we can create another state over here. Now for this reason, we'll just go ahead and copy this one, and let's change the name of this state. So user loaded state. Okay, so now we have two states. So each time only one state works with this bloc library. So we'll come to this blocks over here. So we'll trigger a new state. So in this case, we'll emit. Now we'll see what happens. Okay, so we emitted the first state, and then we changed to another state. And at the same time, we have done this check over here. That state is, if this is the loading state, then we show this circular progress indicator. But now if we are going to run it, we will see very different result, and it just gone. Why? Because first our initial state was that one, and we emitted that, and after emitting we printed this line over here, and then we emitted another new state, right? But this state we are not finding it over here, okay? But actually we can go ahead and check that if state is user loaded state, and then let's do something. So here we could do simply return a text widget over here, and here we do within center child and text the second state, okay? So that's what we would do, okay? So now let's go ahead and check. So first we'll see this state triggered this widget, and that's gone immediately, and then we'll see this text, but I think this will happen very fast. Let's go ahead and check it. Okay, now the loading section was really fast, okay? So it goes away automatically, but at the same time we see that you emitted the first state and it happened, okay? Because this state, after that we have this statement. So what does it mean? It means that you can do many things between two states, okay? So what do you want to do over here? Actually, you want to load the data, okay? What's the data? The data that we have in our method, which is called in our repository, this one. And how to do that? And this is the thing actually we are doing over here. So we are injecting our repository when the app boot up. So let's go back to that one. So let's remove that, okay, and we'll need this. Okay, now for now everything else could stay the same. And one thing we need to do, we need to pass this repository over here. Okay, as we are passing it, we need to make changes over here. So let's uncomment this, and inside this constructor, we'll just simply go ahead and pass this one. But of course, we can't pass it like this. We need to add this. Okay, now the error should be gone. Now, as we have this object over here, actually we would be able to access the method. Okay. Okay, so this is our try catch clause, and over here, as you see that we are using this repository object to get the users, and we save it to a variable. Now this users object should hold all the data, but we want the data to be available to our app even later. So how to do that? Now for this reason, we need to come to this loaded state over here, and as you see that we have props. So inside this, actually we can save the data. Now how to save it? So over here we'll declare a variable, and there would be list type, and inside this the type of the list would be user model, okay? Because whatever the data we are retrieving from this repository eventually, okay, let me see. So whatever the data over here we are saving, so we are saving as user model, because eventually this returns over here user model, as you can see. Okay, so now inside our states over here, so we'll create a variable and we'll call it users. Okay, now this users, actually we also need to pass over here. Of course, but of course at the same time you do user loaded state, and we are passing this dot users. Okay, all right. Remember, user loaded state is a class, so from our blocks over here we are going to pass this one. So we are passing this user object to this user loaded state as like we are emitting the state. And as we do it, it would come over here and eventually save this user information in this prop itself. Now the benefit of this one, that you can access this one later, okay, even from anywhere you want. So with this, the data would be loaded and saved in this props. That also means that your UI can access that later, and we don't want it anymore. Now over here, we want to do one more thing. If things go wrong, if somehow we can't load the data, so we want to emit another state, that would be error state. So here we do user error state. And here we'll just simply pass e.string, okay? So you'll convert it to string. But if you come over here in this states, you'll see that we don't have this one. So we'll go ahead and create that. So for this one, we'll simply go ahead and copy this, and here inside this we'll put user error state, and over here we'll copy this one and change the name. Now how about this one? Of course we are not sending list to it, we are sending string type variables. So over here we do string, and instead of this one we'll just simply call it error. So let's copy this and change them over here, over here. Okay, now the error should be gone. Now if you take a look at this blocks over here, and I think we need to do it capital letter, and the error should be gone. Perfect. So what's gonna happen over here? So from UI we'll trigger this event, so which will cause this user loading state, this state to be available, and then we'll see our circular progress indicator. At the same time we'll load the data from the server, and as the data is loaded down, then we'll emit a new state. That new state will tell the UI, hey, the data has been loaded, and of course this state would be available in our UI as well. Okay, so we can check that. How can we check that? Once again, of course we check it from this block builder. Okay, and we already did that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it one more time and make sure that everything is okay, going smoothly. Let's go ahead and do that. Yes, just now we saw the data has been loaded, and then we see it says that the second state. But now there's the time to show the data on the UI. Okay, as the data has been loaded, now over here based on this state we want to show a new widget and show the data. Now to be able to do that, first we need to get the data. And how do you get the data? Remember, using this state actually we can access the data. So you could do state dot users, okay, and that's it. Now we need to save it in a variable, so we'll save it in a list, and we'll call the list type is user model, okay, and we'll save it inside. And so here we'll name it user list, and after that inside this actually we're going to remove this, and instead of this we'll return a list view builder. And the list view builder, inside this we have this card. Now what's happening over here, because we have this state object which has to do with this one, and now this saves the users that we have loaded from the repository, and that we save it in a new variable called user list. And because we are using list view builder, so you'd be able to get the length and access each of them using this index. So over here we are accessing the first name, last name, and circle overture. So now let's go ahead and load the data and show the data on the server, on this app. So our app is loading data, and let's see what's going on. And the loading is done, and we see that it's there. So congratulations, so you have successfully loaded data using bloc from API. Now of course we can style it a little bit over here. Now what if things go wrong? What's gonna happen? Well, if things go wrong, actually we can do another check over here. So for error check, okay, so what we'll do over here, we do if state is user error state. In this case, what are you going to do? So now here we just simply return another widget, and that widget, it could be any random widget. In our case we'd return a text widget, and here we'd say error happened. Now how do you simulate this error? Actually we can do it easily. So we need to come to our repository over here. Now just simply go ahead and change any of this variable. It doesn't really matter, because then it's the wrong endpoint, and in that case we should fall back to this one, and as we do, it will trigger this user error states, and if it does, then over here we can check it and show this one. Let's go ahead and do it. So we're trying to load, as you see it couldn't get the data, and here it showed error. So that's how you manage the state, regardless you fetch data or other things you do. So all you need to do, you need to find a way in your blocks to trigger the states, and as you do that, they're available in your UI. Hopefully it makes sense. Now we'll come over here and change it back, and we'll load our app, and we see the data is here. Okay, great. Now the rest part is actually pretty easy. here is our detail screen, and over here all we're doing, passing the user model and access the underlying properties using the dot operator. And so we access each of the user information from this user list using this index, okay, and that becomes the user model. Okay, of course I think we have to have the semicolon over here. Now let's load our app one more time. It's loading and loaded information. Click on them, so we see each user. Go back and click again and we see new user. Yeah, so that's how you work with the block to get data from API.